we are never truly lost. Well, okay, sure, maybe we get turned around for a few days in the woods, where life just feels like it's getting the best of us, and everything's going wrong. And I'm Mike Martin, and I've stood right where you're standing, lost, beaten down, like nothing's ever gonna change. And that's why I built this camp. And that's why I'm inviting you to join me and all the members of this wild community. Because you know what, friend? It does get better. So come along with me into the wild and let me show you this awesome, unique skill set that lays within inside of you. With help from the land, we're going to unlock the steward that's inside each and every one of us that will lead the way out of the darkness and into healing. Here at the Camp of Healing on Project Mindfully Outdoors.
All right, Chad, I know you're a little bit jealous of my background. I know you offered to run down to the beach, which, and being in a hurricane impacted area, I feel this is the best way to do this today. But I want to jump right in, and I want to dive into this idea and get your thoughts on how you maintain a positive, productive attitude in the midst of adversity.
I would say one of the most underrated things today is recognizing our environment, Mike. So my background was I was blessed and fortunate to have been adopted into the oldest Maori indigenous tribe in New Zealand several years back. And they noted that they saw the thing that they noticed about the Western world in the United States in particular were a bunch of gurus and teachers going off and doing spirituality instead of being spiritual, right? And I see that in our world and in our environment today is that we go off and it's like, okay, I'm out in nature. What do we got to do? How about nature's just being? Maybe you should assimilate and be as well, right? Is allowing ourselves to be open to that. Because the reality is we live in a society, and we brought a bunch of women that were struggling through various traumas. And after a couple of weeks of the elders hearing these guests saying, oh, this is such a magical place, it's such a spiritual place, it's such a wonderful place, they took their toko and slammed it down, just a walking staff or a talking stick, and they said, no, I keep on hearing all of you say it's such a magical place, such a wonderful place, such a spiritual place. This is what normal is. We live in such a toxic society that we don't even recognize what normal and healthy is. Why? Because when we even go outside, we're insulated by our shoes, right? We have so much insulation. So right now, yes, I'm inside, but I have a grounding mat, below the floor, and I'm wearing no socks or shoes. So I'm grounding and connecting back to nature. And the reason for that is because in our society, we have all these smart devices and we have all of this electronic interference. We have all this stuff coming at us that we're sitting here doing this. And when we go out in nature, it's grounding us and it's allowing us to dissolve. So as we breathe and exhale, we create carbon dioxide. And the trees and the plants go, oh, thank you for that fuel, for that food. Well, guess what? Nature also is asking us to lay down in the grass, put our feet in the sand, put and walk in the soil, go connect, and it will feed us and it'll dissolve. So when we go and ground, all that energy is giving fuel source to the earth. That's what it's designed to do. And in exchange, it gives us replenishment and centeredness and presence. And so that's the really one of the biggest pieces I see in our society that is so, do, that we don't even realize that we're building all of this tension. It's really not that difficult to dissipate.
I love the way that you put that, because it really is. It's something that, early on in my mindful adventure, I discovered that because there was a big shift in the way that I went out into the wilderness. I'd go out to hunt and fish or whatever the case may be. And it was all about getting the results. And a lot of that had to do with this idea that I was kind of frightened of the thoughts or the ideas that would come up because of all the stress and everything that was going on in the world around me. And then, came that shift where I started actually exploring the idea of meditation and being mindful. And it changed that principal idea of we go out just for the result. And instead, now it's a matter of going out just to go. And just to be present, to feel that, as you put, that lift, that renewal, that rejuvenation. And, it's something that is a very beautiful thing. But in the context of our society, it's also something that's kind of scary to get into.
Well, I would agree that we're so caught up on the doingness that we forget to enjoy. We're so hell-bent on getting to the destination of, I got to be happy. We forget to enjoy the journey, right? And so I had a client today in London, and thankfully to technology, we want technology that complements us, not technology that competes or robs us of our time. And he was talking about how much he had to do. And I just said, close your eyes for a minute and just take a couple deep breaths in. And this guy's a very accomplished person in the world. And he just sat and went, and you could just see him connecting. And I said, now, where is that tension showing up in your body? He's like, right here. I said, okay, which direction is that energy wanting to go? This way or this way? He goes, this way. I said, yeah, that's your body saying, I want to connect in, I need to get rooted. I need to ground and give this back to nature. And in exchange, nature will give you something. And so we get so caught up in our doingness, we forget to first ask ourselves, when I wake up in the morning, there's two things that I do. One is I have a prayer, may peace begin with me, and may I begin with peace. And before the curtain of the stage of life goes up, we can remind ourselves, who do I choose to be in the midst of whatever it is I'm going to do? Now, imagine if I just showed up, Mike, and I just had, something in my environment or a person just was irate and really disturbed me. And I brought that into this conversation. What I'm saying is, it's not my fault or responsibility. It's my environment. It's other people. But we make a choice. And so nature is offering us to make a choice as well. Do you want to have a relationship that is symbiotic, that requires exchange? Or do you want a relationship where we just are take? And when we do that, as you know, in hunting, as you know, in nature, you have to give something back, right? You don't take the herd to a level where it infarctates and dies, it collapses. We have to have a relationship with that. And we've lost that relationship of when is enough, right? And what are you doing to contribute? And so the second piece that I see in when we connect and we go out in nature, I go out and I walk for an hour every day. The last half mile, I take my shoes off and I walk barefoot. Is what is our relationship? And in that relationship, what is our responsibility to contribute beyond ourselves? We've become a nation from a we to a me. And what that's done is it's depleted the resources, and we need to actually go plant the seed and nurture and weed and water it to regrow it so that we have something down the road to harvest. So we have something for the next generations to harvest. And so it requires us to get out of just, it's good for me. And we need to look at, it needs to be good for we.
You know, real quick, I want to go back to something that you said, because I know a lot of people that I encounter, there's a good handful of them, that this is a fearful and scary kind of idea. The last half mile of your hike or your walk, you're taking your shoes off and feeling that connection, feeling that energy. And the reason that I highlight that is because that somebody hearing that, it can make it okay by experiencing somebody else's journey through listening to the story. And then to get back to where you were going, you know, it is that idea, I think, of manifest destiny that really emphasizes the me at the cost of everything else, you know, regardless of if it's other people or it's resources in the environment. And we've been taught that generation after generation. We're starting to slowly combat it, but then there's so much that we have to rebuild based off of all of those mistakes. And a lot of the complication within that, I feel, becomes kind of man-made because we look at those mistakes in shame. And we do the same thing in our lives. You know, we're kind of navigating through with the vocabulary that we know. We make mistakes and we hold that cloud of shame over our head much longer than we need to. When you come out into nature and you actually sit down and connect with it, you see the clouds move in and out of the sky. You see a visual representation of that ability within you to let go of the shame from the mistake and start to craft a more effective vocabulary and tools and resources so that next time you encounter it, you can deal with it accordingly and make a better decision.
Yeah, I would agree. We live in a society, and let's face it, we have a lot going on in the world today between, you know, war-torn areas. There's several of those that haven't erupted in quite some time and that are now in skirmishes. We have the politics of elections coming up. And we have people in small and medium-sized businesses that are seeing things are harder. Well, where else do we see that from time to time? You know, we typically have 4 seasons in nature. And if we don't respect those seasons, it has no forgiveness. If you don't see the colors of the leaves changing and start stocking up and storing for the winter, it's not going to come and give you welfare. It's going to be ruthless on you, right? If we don't take the pauses when they're offered, then it's going to wear us down. But the other thing about nature is we can go out there. Nature accepts you as you are. It's not judging you for, you know, do you have the right brand on your, you know, your hunting jacket? It looks at you and goes, you're perfect just as you are, right? It's accepting. And we also need to respect how do we work within nature. So you don't hear a lot about the forest fires in Europe. There's forest fires in Europe, but they manage them and they prune them back. But the problem is we have a society today that says, oh, I don't want to look at that ugliness for a short period of time because it would be responsible and it would prevent catastrophic, you know, issues later. When we look at herds and we go out hunting, I get people from time to time because I tend to hunt moose and elk, and I'll take an animal. First thing that I showed my son was that we give thanks because of our relationship with that animal. It gave its life to provide for our family, right? There's a relationship there. And if we don't respect that relationship, we saw during the pandemic, it was a matter of 2 weeks and dolphins started coming up to the shore. The Venice Canal was crystal clear and dolphins were coming into there. Animals were returning back into places that we've scattered them because we are in a relationship of it's, you know, what do I want? But to your point with that is that we need to slow down and ask ourselves, what is our relationship with that? Because it will tear through us. It doesn't need us, but we certainly do need it. And we have to have that respect for that. And that begins on the inside of saying, how does all of the things in nature translate within ourselves? And how are we actually respecting taking care and taking responsibility within ourselves.
That's where I feel a lot of people really are kind of on the cuff. They're becoming aware of their place within the world and the potential that they have. But it's building that bridge through the vocabulary, through the willingness to actually go out and touch things. Or as my son says, touch grass. And, it's a fun statement and all that. And we put a lot of buzzwords around it to motivate people to do these things. But I feel you really have to go inward and tap into that respect for your place within the circle of the world in order to find the motivation to go out and touch that grass or whatever the activity may be that helps you to visualize and facilitate the growth that all these things are leading to.
The key ingredient I see so much missing in these unique times is we can talk about all these elements, and other people have talked about everything under the sun. But the piece that I see missing today that is part of our nature is having a sense of humor, right? Laughing. And if we actually sit back and are still long enough sitting out in nature, nature has some absolute humor that will make us belly roll, be that the animals or, birds or watching, critters of whatever sort is quite the comedy, right? It knows how to play. And we grow up at some point, and there's an old analogy of we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. And nature invites us out to play with her. And we need to remember to play, and we need to remember to laugh at that silliness.
That's where the true intention, I think, comes out the best, is being able to re-engage with that childlike curiousness. Because to be honest, it's kind of frowned upon in today's culture, in today's society. It's all about work and just getting the results. And, obviously with doing the podcast and things like that, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And then there's also the adventure of getting to the places that I do that. And to really highlight a great recent experience that there was no room to do anything but laugh. I was out doing a round of interviews about a month or two ago, sitting in one of my favorite spots, and this older deer had decided to take up residence. She was a little skittish at first, and a couple days into me being out there, she got used to me. And then when I get up to go and leave at the end of that last day that I was out there, she was actually huffing at me, trying to demand me to stay in place. It was very interesting. It was very fun, though.
Yeah. Yeah. When we see that underwater, there's a great movie out there, documentary, The Octopus Teacher or something like that, an octopus, relationship with a human being. And then we see that in the playfulness of wildlife, bears playing. But if we actually allow ourselves to connect, then we can have deer that say, oh yeah, I'm enjoying your company, right? So yeah, we want to play. Yes, we want to laugh. But nature also reminds us of the moments to be still, right? And when we can get feet on grass, go touch grass, as your son would say, is it allows us to be centered. It allows us to let go of focusing on the past, let go of focusing on the future, and just be present in the now. And that's all nature does. Nature's just present on the now. The flower isn't worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, right? It is naturally responding to the sun and the circadian rhythm of the sun. And so there's times in there also that if we learn from nature, that once we are grounded, it will naturally create a stillness within us. And so we put put kids on Ritalin and things for ADHD or ADD or, PTSD, is a lot of it is that we're sitting here doing this because we have all this interference, that when we actually get out in nature, we can just be present and we can be still. And when we allow the children to go out and play, exhaust themselves, exert themselves, then they can go into the classroom, then they can go in the home, and they're able to learn. They're able to be present because they've gotten it out, right? They've expressed that. Animals do the same thing. We can watch, cubs, and they go out and they banter, they play, and then mom will tell them to be still, and they're able to. But there's a natural order that we're violating, and we've kind of lost that template that if we just sit back and connect and go out in nature, the template's right there for us to observe.
It is, because I think about, those early days in that shift and the discovery of the natural balance, within the circle of life and the circle of nature, and how every single aspect of it supports one another. The sun supports the vegetation, which supports the animals. And then if you think about it at a very core level, we support all that by having a voice, by having an ability to tell the stories and, really create the atmosphere for whatever it is that we truly desire to have.
Yeah, speaking of voice, it reminds me of when I was growing up, hearing, I don't want to see you inside until dinner time, right? It was a different time for me growing up than it is today. And we, our parents weren't our entertainment committee. It was very clear. Go be creative. So what happens when you're outdoors and you don't have, technology, is your mind begins to get creative. That voice within, you start to tune in, and the art and the artist within you starts, exploring. And nature's designed to be explored, right? And so I thanked my parents. And, at the time I was like, it's hot, I don't want to be outside. But that's when I was out in the woods. That's when I was connecting with friends. That's when the real relationships, happened. And we exerted ourselves to wear ourselves down and be present and laugh and then be still. But today, I watched my son when he was young and invited his friends over, and we had the pool, we had the trampoline, we had everything for them. And they're all sitting inside on the couch, like 7 of them, and they're all sitting here doing, this. I'm like, why aren't you guys all talking to each other? And they're like, well, we're having conversations with people who weren't even there. And I'm like, what happened to our society where we lost touch with going outside and embracing what it had to offer? That technology has become like this issue where we can have surface level connections with a bunch of people around the world, but no deep relationships with any single person because, ooh, that would be risky. Ooh, that might make me have to be vulnerable, right? It's like vulnerability is actually strength, right? It is that's going to build enough self-esteem that we have to be able to withstand some humor, withstand some criticism. See, when you go out and you got to walk across the log, if you can't do that and you fall into the stream, it's like, well, do you want to learn how to get better at that? Right? It's going to teach you those things. But I see that we struggle with some of that when we sit indoors and we don't allow ourselves to go outside. And one of the things I love to do is I'm notorious when I travel around the world that I just wander. Like if I go to Rome, I just start walking. If I go to Venice, I just start walking down these canals, and people are like, well, what do you do when you're done? I'm like, well, it might be 10 miles out. And then I just grab my phone and say, take me back to here. I put one earbud in so that it's navigating, because I don't speak Italian, right? And it navigates me back. Today, technology allows us to do that. But so often I see people, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Whatever you want. There's no agenda. Drop in and tune in to see what it offers. Is how many of us just explore? It's inviting us to do that. And that's the voice that we can hear when we listen.
And I think that's something that, whether it's the concrete world or it's nature, that invitation is everywhere. It's all around you. If you're willing to look at it, you're willing to put in the miles and, tie your boots up and go. But on the other hand, the biggest struggle that we have is we've all learned reliance, and based off of everything comes to us. We're not willing to take the time to maybe download a map and go out and do it for ourselves. We expect it to come to us with the instant gratification. And the positive side of that is because nature is still here, because we still have opening doors and we still have boots, we still have the opportunity to train ourselves, to really dive into the adversity of getting ourselves into a situation, figuring it out, building self-confidence, and then going out and taking it a step further and discovering that purpose.
Yeah, if we don't take ourselves to the challenge, then we're gonna be knocked down real quick, right? Nature can be unforgiving. Nature can be risky, right? But nature's going to tell you exactly where you stand. So if you don't have the aptitude, if you don't build the muscle, if you don't have the wherewithal to push through and learn how to do those things, it's going to cut you down pretty quickly, right? But it also gives you the opportunity that when this says, oh, this is hard, this is difficult, I want to quit, the body itself is capable of 20 times more. And so if we stick with it, and I remember years ago, my wife, I'd had surgery. I snapped my Achilles 100% at the bone, so I wasn't able to walk for a while. And we were out in the Great Smoky Mountains, and she wanted to go for a hike. And I said, well, are you sure? I mean, that all by yourself? Oh, yeah, I'll be fine. Now, for me, because I'm a former Marine, I would have, where's the map? Where's the checkpoints? Let somebody know if I don't, I would have had a protocol list. And she just went out, and she was out for about 6 hours, 8 hours, and a couple hours in, she realized she had no idea where she was. And she got lost because she just got so caught up in immersing herself in nature. She just followed this path, which was a deer path, right? It wasn't a human path. And she ended up going, how do I get out of here? But she actually then figured it out, right? She had that desperation of, what happens if I don't get found? Nobody's coming to rescue you. It gives us the opportunity and affords us the challenge of, you are going to rescue you. Slow down. Take a look around of what your environment is. And she went, oh, wait, there's a stream. Which way is it going? I remember. And she followed that up. And she was able to find her way out. And by doing that, nature afforded her that she built the muscle of, oh, I can do this. Helped her build the mental fortitude of, oh, I'm capable of figuring this out, right? It actually emboldened and strengthened her. And it also taught her a lesson of, next time, I need to think about doing some of those, other things before she goes out. Do I have a canteen? Those kind of things. So it can teach us some really powerful lessons and humble us, but it also can build the muscle and strengthen us as well.
So let's do this as we start to wind down. But I want to have you talk to somebody who may be finding themselves in a position where life has got them feeling just that, vulnerable, and looking to expand their horizon by building a connection that's meaningful and that's going to help them to work themselves out of their rut and land in their place and their purpose. How do they get started on that?
Well, the first I would say is get grounded, get centered, right? Is there a particular place? And often, we might think of, oh, I got to go out in the woods, but maybe it's a botanical garden, right? Maybe it's a park if you're living in more of an urban area. But where can you go and allow yourself to get small? Allow yourself to get, grounded, and allow yourself to be able to connect the heart and the head so that the voice can actually allow us to be able to do some contemplation. So nature gives us the opportunity to be still in that moment and be able to say, what if it wasn't an either or? What if there was a third, fourth, fifth option? And so it affords us the space and the latitude to just contemplate or meditate, to be able to tap into our inner wisdom, right? So often what I find in that, Mike, is that it's our ego that's in the driver's seat, and it's what if I fail? What if I'm judged? What if I'm not enough? All of that fear that is driving the car off the cliff. And nature gives us an opportunity to say, hey, let's put that in the parking lot and not bring it into the nature. And then our highest self is able to start being heard. And when we do that more and more often, it's kind of like back in the day when, before we had caller ID, somebody picked up the phone and they didn't have caller ID. How did you know who was on the other side? Well, by the sound of their voice. So nature has a very specific voice. And the more that you connect with her, the more you recognize that voice, and the more that you're able to connect at your highest self. Now, let's say that it's the opposite, and that maybe that's not really what you need. The opposite may be, maybe you need to go out and chop wood and bring in some water. Maybe you need to go out and exert yourself. Maybe you need to go dig a ditch, or go do something that builds a sense of accomplishment, to exert that energy and get it out. That's what is really ultimately up to what nature says is, what do you need? Here's the invitation. I'll give you whatever you need. What is it that you need? But we have to be able to slow down enough to be able to check in and say, oh, this is what I need.
I think within that vulnerability, it's about being willing to ask yourself the right questions. And it's about being open and honest with yourself, understanding that to figure out what you need isn't a conversation that involves an audience. Therefore, there's no need to cover anything up.
Yeah, that ego is what wants to cover it up. That ego is what puts that armor and says it's not safe to be vulnerable. But whatever is soft is strong. Whatever is vulnerable is powerful. And that's actually the definition of Tai Chi, right? And so when we go out to nature, nature just says, I already see you naked. I see everything. So you have nothing to fear, right? And so it allows us to be able to turn off our ego and say, I trust you actually already have the answers within, Mike. It's about asking the right questions. And that's the center of coaching, the executive coaching that I do, is our premise is you already have the answer. My job is to ask the powerful question that brings that to the surface. And nature can be a powerful coach, giving you the opportunity to say, here's the question. If we're willing to be vulnerable enough to check that ego and say, you're not welcome out in nature right now, I'll come back. But when I do, you get in the back seat. You're not allowed in the driver's seat anymore.
That's exactly it. I love that analogy. I mean, I use that for a lot of things because we all have different aspects of ourselves that may be a strength, but then again, there's many things that may be a weakness. Learning how to bridge that gap and embrace both sides of the coin, I feel like that's where it's really at.
Yeah, the thing, I love about nature is we live in a society where we have a lot of people that come over top of us, right? They're the expert, they know, and we try to make us small or try to dominate or bully us. Nature's really great about its ability to come alongside of us and hold our hand and say, I'll be your friend. Nature rarely comes over top of us. Nature's great as a friend to compliment us and be compassionate and gentle and say, let me come alongside and support you. So that's why, nature's one of my best friends that way. And whether I was in the military, in out in the field doing things, and, when you're in some scary scenarios, nature's what comforted me in those difficult times. And whether that's, I've been in Australia in the middle of the night and kangaroos and giant fruit bats hanging down at 2 a.m. And It's like, oh, that's just nature, right? Nature's going to help you understand whether what you're looking at is fear or real danger, but it's going to be usually pretty gentle, come alongside and help you navigate and discern which it is. And most of the time it goes, yeah, that's just a false emotion appearing real. It's not real danger.
That's where the answers to all the hard questions truly lay, if you're willing to walk down a trail. And speaking of, as we come to the end, I got one last question for you that's probably really difficult, Cody. How can people get in touch with you? Find out what you got going on, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. The best way, Mike, is that they can just go to my website, chadecooper.com. E is an echo, chadecooper.com. That's where you're going to find out about my coaching, which actually is, I think, the first time in 18 years. I'm an empty nester. Son's in his third year at university. I've got extra time. And I'm like, it's time for me to, I used to be the best kept secret to some financial titans, billionaires, professional athletes, and Olympians. So I'm the guy behind the scenes to like World Series and Stanley Cups and Formula One racing, things that you've never, never knew I existed. Well, now you do. And so if you want to learn more and you want some coaching, I have some slots that I've opened up. If you want to buy my book or you want to look at the programs, just go to chadecooper.com. Thank you for asking.
All right, no problem. Well, thank you for the conversation today. I don't believe in goodbyes because they're too final. So until we meet again, whether it's this life or the next, I wish you a safe, prosperous journey, my friend.
Agreed. Thank you.